Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's topic because it is without a doubt one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and just flat out terrifying anomalies in human history. We're talking about the Strasbourg choreomania of 1518, or as you might know it, the Dancing Plague. Now, when we usually hear the word plague, we immediately picture, fevers, coughing, quarantines, the whole shebang. But what if the main symptom of a plague wasn't a cough, but an uncontrollable compulsion to dance? A compulsion so strong, so relentless, that it literally became fatal. I know, it sounds like some kind of dark, twisted fairy tale, but everything we're about to explore is drawn directly from actual historical records. Let's get into it.
To truly wrap our heads around this, we need to slow things down a bit and set the scene. I want you to picture the streets of Strasbourg. It's the summer of 1518. Just a totally ordinary, blazing hot summer day. People are out and about, going about their daily business, maybe buying food, tending to their chores, just normal, everyday life. And then, a single woman walks right out into the middle of a dirt road. She stops, and she simply starts dancing. No announcements, no warning whatsoever, just this sudden, totally unprompted, chaotic dance right in the middle of a bustling street.
Now, if you were standing there watching this, what would you do? Honestly, the initial reaction from the crowd was exactly what you'd expect. People laughed. I mean, it was an oddity, right? A funny little break from the mundane routine. You can totally imagine the crowd pointing, chuckling, kind of wondering what on earth this woman was doing. But the reality soon set in, and that humor, it evaporated extremely quickly. Because she didn't stop. Hours went by and she kept moving. The sun went down, still dancing. Days literally began to pass and she continued dancing nonstop, completely without rest. And slowly, the laughter of the crowd turned into this deep, really unsettling concern. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this is exactly where the timeline goes, from a strange, isolated local incident into a full-blown crisis. It starts, right, in a matter of hours with just that one woman. But as days pass, something absolutely terrifying happens. Others begin joining in. One by one, more people just step into the streets and start mimicking her frantic movements. And as the timeline stretches into weeks, we are no longer looking at a handful of eccentric individuals. We are looking at a massive, sprawling crowd of people, all moving relentlessly together. Hundreds! Let that number really sink in for a second. Hundreds of people thrashing in the streets of Strasbourg. And look, this wasn't some coordinated festival, okay? This wasn't a planned flash mob. The historical source material is explicitly clear on one totally terrifying detail. As these hundreds of people joined in, they were completely unable to control themselves. Their bodies were quite literally hijacked. They were trapped inside their own movements, unable to stop their legs and arms from flailing about, just completely powerless against whatever unseen force was compelling them to dance. And this leads us to the truly grim reality of the situation. As the dancing continued relentlessly, the human body simply began to break down. Witnesses reported victims screaming out in absolute agony, their muscles tearing, their bones aching, yet their bodies just kept moving. They couldn't stop to rest, they couldn't grab a drink of water, they couldn't sleep. Dancers began collapsing right there in the streets. They suffered from total exhaustion. Hearts gave out. Strokes took them down on the hard cobblestones. According to the historical records of the time, people literally danced until they died. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what was entirely absent. When we think of dancing today, we naturally think of rhythm, joy, sound, right? But there was no music playing in the streets of Strasbourg when this madness began. There was no local festival or celebration going on. And above all, there was absolutely no clear explanation. Just imagine for a second the sheer psychological horror of walking through your city and seeing hundreds of people dancing themselves to death in complete and utter silence. It is just mind-boggling. Section 2. The disastrous cure. Okay, let's dive into this, because with people literally dying in the streets, unable to stop moving, the local authorities had to step in. But remember, we're talking about the year 1518. They didn't have modern medicine. They had zero understanding of neurology. Believing the dancers were afflicted by some sort of curse, they enacted this completely bizarre municipal action plan. Step 1, hire musicians. Step 2, build actual stages. Step 3, encourage them to just dance it out. I mean, they genuinely thought that if they provided a structured environment with real music and sturdy stages, the dancers would eventually exhaust the curse and be cured. But as you can probably guess, by turning this plague into a literal spectacle and adding driving, rhythmic music to the streets, the plan spectacularly backfired. It didn't cure anyone, it only made things much, much worse.
Section 3, the unsolved mystery. And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the problem, because the stages and musicians completely failed to cure anyone, and the dancing eventually just subsided on its own, leaving us with one massive, lingering question. Why? Well, even today, historians intensely debate the cause, and they're divided mostly into three schools of thought. Theory 1 points to mass hysteria. I want you to just imagine the sheer level of fear and stress required to trigger a psychological break on a citywide scale, forcing the brain to move the body involuntarily. It's wild to think about. Then there's Theory 2, which suggests contaminated food. Could there have been a mold or a fungus in the local grain supply that summer that caused severe hallucinations and involuntary spasms? And finally, there is Theory 3, something darker. A completely unknown contagion or force that just spread quietly through the city that summer, leaving absolute devastation in its wake. All three theories are still hotly debated to this very day. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. The dancing plague wasn't some made-up myth. It was a very real, very mysterious 1518 event where hundreds of people danced nonstop for days, totally unable to control themselves, resulting in mass casualties. Over 500 years later, it still remains one of the strangest real-world events in all of human history. It was a terrifying moment in time where an entire city fell victim to a compulsion so strong, so overpowering, that many of the dancers simply never stopped. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly unsettling thought. If mass hysteria, fear, and stress could actually cause hundreds of people to lose total control of their own bodies and literally dance to their deaths in the streets of Strasbourg back in 1518, what could those exact same psychological triggers make us do today? The human mind is incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly fragile. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.